Following Monday morning, March 12, 2018, Ebony Giddens' brother, Alvin, knocked on her door on Montclair Drive in Columbus, Georgia, just part of the everyday routine, picking her sons up to take them to school.
Once he knocked on the door and see she wasn't coming to the door, I guess he, began knocking harder, and the kids answered the door, and it was like, well, she's not here. So it was like, she's not there, what's going on? So at that point, we knew something wasn't right because she'll never leave the kids by herself.
When he went inside the apartment with his 5-year-old nephew, he found Ebony's purse left behind in the living room. Her wallet and keys were also there, but both Ebony and her phone were gone. Where was Ebony? The 27-year-old mother of 3 boys, ages 9, 5, and 2, built her life around them.
As a mom, she would do anything for her boys. Anything they wanted, anything she could try to get, she will get for them. She had them. She was taking care of them. So she was doing the best she could.
Just 2 days before, Ebony was with her family at a weekend cookout. It was a typical Saturday night, eating barbecue, playing cards. She loved playing spades, deuces, and dominoes. It was the last time they would see her.
My favorite moments is when we would be at the barbecues and we're playing cards, laughing, having a good time, joking around. And she'll, act like she know what she doing and she don't even know what she doing for real, for real.
But that March night, Ebony had a secret. The man she was dating, Malcolm Jackson, was abusive, and sometimes he frightened her. Just the day before, she called the police after he had put a gun to her head during a fight.
Most things she would keep to herself because she know how my family will react to her.
Police arrested Jackson and locked him up. Ebony had filed a restraining order, but he was back home the same day, calling her over and over again in violation of the order.
She was very afraid of him. Some of the things that we did find out that was going on, we didn't know. She wouldn't tell us. He was abusing her. Some of the things that he was saying to her, the places that he would take her, he would leave her in the middle of the street somewhere, and she would have to try to get home by herself.
These details all coming to light after Ebony's disappearance. There were searches around town in this city of about 200,000 people. Police, family, and friends searched the neighborhood on Montclair Drive where Ebony was last seen. They also went looking for her in wooded areas near her apartment and in neighboring towns where Jackson had left her on the road during arguments. Many people looking for this quiet, loving mother who had suddenly disappeared. Jackson was out of jail at the time of Ebony's disappearance, but was jailed again on charges of aggravated stalking and violating the probation. A year later, he was found guilty of assault, possession of a firearm, and of stalking Ebony. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison, but not for Ebony's disappearance. During the search for Ebony, her family was also the target of extortion and online threats. The family now says they hang on to hope and their faith for an answer.
Overall, we try to give it to God and let Him handle it because at this point, we can't handle it. It's a lot.
We just keep praying and trying to keep hoping that one day we mainly want closure, even if it may be that she is dead. But we want some closure and to give the kids some closures to what happened to her. That these kids, because they're constantly growing, that they knowing that they had a mother and one day they didn't have her, but we don't know what happened.
And if you have any information that can help find Ebony Giddens, you can contact the Columbus, Georgia Police Department. Now it is your turn to join this conversation. Maybe you've caught something that the experts have missed in Ebony's case, or maybe you have questions about other missing cases that we feature here in our Missing series. Send us those questions and comments now, and we'll do our best to answer them and bring you into this discussion. Ebony is part of what some call an ignored group, missing persons of color, minority women, men, and children who disappear. Their families often frustrated that their loved one's case does not get the full attention from law enforcement or from the media. Derica Wilson is with us. She is the co-founder of the Black and Missing Foundation, a nonprofit whose mission is to bring awareness to missing persons of color and make sure their cases are getting covered like all of the other ones. Derica, thank you for being with us. Tell me more about how you started this organization, why, and more about your mission.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. The Black and Missing Foundation started 15 years ago The inspiration behind the organization was a young lady by the name of Tanika Houston. She went missing from my hometown of Spartanburg, South Carolina. And despite the fact that her aunt worked in media relations, she struggled to garner mainstream media for her niece's disappearance. And a year later, Natalee Holloway went missing and her name became a household name. And we just wanted to see, was there really an issue when persons of color were being reported missing with law enforcement and the media? And we discovered in 2008 that 30% of missing persons in the United States were persons of color. So we wanted to really utilize our background and our expertise. My background is law enforcement. Natalee, who is also the co-founder, she is in media relations. And those are the two critical professions needed in finding and bringing our missing home.
I'm glad you brought up how you started, and I know I prompted you by asking, but the Natalee Holloway case, the case of Gabby Petito is the reason we started our missing case. I mean, one, it was to find Gabby, but two, we recognized very quickly and heard from the community that there were so many other cases that weren't getting the attention of Gabby's. Equally important, which is important to note. And here we are, and some of the images you're seeing on the screen are cases that we have covered in the last year and a half. And I'm glad to partner with you, Derica, because we have a very big responsibility as the media to cover these. I want to talk to you about the media component. How have you seen things change over the course of launching your foundation and working with the media? Has it gotten any better, and what's been the response?
Absolutely. We have seen great improvement. We have been invited to the newsrooms to talk about these issues as it relates to coverage. You know, Black media has been an ally to our organization to bring awareness to this. But we're also finding that a lot of newsrooms don't have policy and procedures in place to determine who they cover and how they cover these cases. So we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. But I want to mention that, you know, when it comes to missing persons, it shouldn't, you know, race, zip codes, gender should not be a barrier. And with our organization, we're not trying to dishonor any community. We're just simply trying to even the playing field, because these families are hurting when their loved ones are missing. You know, just think about if you misplaced your cell phone or your keys, your anxiety is through the roof. So you can't even begin to imagine not knowing where your loved one is, again, regardless of race.
Right. I think I've said a number of times through our series that every missing person matters, right? Put yourself in that family's shoe, no matter their background, their past, their race, their circumstances. It's somebody who is loved, somebody who is missed. As you make inroads with law enforcement, and I know you're very close to the law enforcement community, what are the challenges in getting them to pay attention to cases? Because oftentimes a case is complicated, it goes back a while, and it comes down to resources.
Oh, absolutely. So with law enforcement, especially being in that profession, being able to bridge that gap, knowing what the process is and what it should be, and certainly advocating for these families. You know, oftentimes our children, they're classified as runaways, and there's really no sense of urgency in finding them. And what we are seeing is that families begin taking matters into their own hand, especially when they feel as if law enforcement is not taking the case seriously. They start creating their own flyers, they start putting their information out there, and then they become the subject of scam and ransom calls. But with our strategy, especially having that PR side, we also utilize our media partners to help apply pressure to law enforcement. No police department ever wants to be embarrassed. So when we partner with the media, that helps us apply pressure to law enforcement to dedicate additional resources to these cases.
I'm really hung up on that statistic that you mentioned a moment ago, that 40% of missing cases are of the Black and Brown community. What is the commonality that so many people in these communities are vanishing?
Well, you know, there are so many issues why people are going missing in the first place. Number one, we have human trafficking, mental health, domestic violence. And if I can just take a step back with the human trafficking aspect of it, there was research done recently by the Urban Institute, and they actually interviewed traffickers to understand why they were targeting people of color, women of color in particularly. And the response was, they knew that law enforcement would not look for Black women and girls if they were reported missing. And if they were caught, they knew that they would get less jail time than if they targeted a white woman or girl.
Wow, that's shocking to hear. And it's important to hear because a lot of people don't go missing on their own free will, right? That's often the misconception, is that they ran away, right? They don't want to be found.
Oh, absolutely. It really is a misconception. And I think as a society, we have to understand and speak up on how law enforcement handle these cases. So, for example, every jurisdiction can operate in a manner in which they choose. You have some states or some jurisdictions that require families to wait 24 hours before they report their loved ones missing, while you have other jurisdictions that will take the case immediately. There really isn't one size fits all. And so what we are enlisting our elected officials to do is create legislation where, regardless of the jurisdiction, the state, regardless of the race, the gender, we need legislation that law enforcement across the country handle all cases the same way. It needs to be black and white. We have to remove that gray. We have to remove the opportunity for their discretion.
And what's the status of that mission of making that inroad legislatively?
Well, there has been a lot of movement. I know in Minnesota under Representative Ruth Richardson, she introduced a bill that was just passed for missing and murdered Black women and girls. We know that California, the senator has proposed a bill, the Ebony Alert. And there are other jurisdictions and states that are taking a page out of the book of Minnesota as well as California to try to hone in on this issue, because people of color, they're disappearing at a disproportionate rate. And when we talk about the statistics, when we're talking about the 40%, that the key word in that is reported. And that data is coming from the FBI. And so that is when law enforcement actually report the cases. There are so many cases that are not even reported to law enforcement. And then the other piece to that is the fact that the Hispanic community, they're classified with the white population, according to those statistics. So although 24% identify as Afro-Latina, they're identified with NCIC for the FBI statistics as white Americans.
Yeah, and Native Americans who go missing also in one of those important categories that gets ignored or overlooked. You know, I challenge anybody to criticize if you have someone go missing that you're going to wait 24 hours before it can be considered a missing case, right? I mean, every minute is excruciating for these families. I'm curious, Derica, where do you hear about the cases? How do they come to you?
So we have families that reach out directly to us on our website. Families can actually fill out our intake form and upload their loved ones' information. Our team goes through a vigorous vetting process and following up with law enforcement to make sure that these cases exist, because we do receive tips. We understand that there's a lack of trust with the minority community. So being able to have that footprint in our community to recognize, look like our community and support our community, we get those tips in. Law enforcement, they actually utilize our database to upload cases, or they'll reach out to us directly because they are short-staffed. There are limited resources. So if we can be a service to them, that's what we want to do, as well as our media partners. There's media partners that could be covering a story in their local area, and then they will send that case over to us so we can help amplify it to mainstream, because we are a national organization.
And we're glad to partner with you. You've mentioned miracles before. We've had some of the cases that we've covered be solved and have positive outcomes. What are some of those that you have seen come to a positive end?
Well, we certainly we're very hopeful, and that is what we lead with is hope, and we want the families to be hopeful. Anyone out there that's watching this broadcast, if you have any information on any of the cases that we cover with News Nation, there's no such thing as little information. You may hold the key to end this nightmare. And as we stated, we have seen miracles happen. We know that someone out there knows something, and we just need them to come forward with information because these families, they're hurting. They're hurting. There is nothing worse than the unknown, not knowing if your loved one is hungry, if they're sick, if they're cold, if they're being mistreated. They're going to walk through the front door again. And we all have a responsibility. It's law enforcement, it's the media, and it's the community. And all the viewers out there, you represent the community. So now it's the time for all of us to join forces. And if you see something, say something. You may hold the piece of the puzzle to end this nightmare.
Yeah, it's powerful, the online community, right? All it takes sometimes is for someone to share a story, share a conversation like the one that we're having now, and then it lands in somebody's inbox or on somebody's social media page, and there's a connection, right? They're able to connect that important dot that could lead to a conclusion, a positive one in one of these cases or in some closure for a family. I know Ebony's case, Ebony Giddens of Georgia, which is the case we're featuring this week, is one that you also have looked into. What stands out to you about this case now 5 years old?
You know, it's so disheartening that this case remains unsolved. You know, you look at this beautiful young woman, a mother of 3 boys, and she's been missing for 5 years. And what's so sad is that, you know, she was a victim of domestic violence in our community, in the minority community. Oftentimes we don't like to talk about things, you know, it's taboo or, you know, the embarrassment or the shame. And, you know, in her particular case, her family didn't know until after the fact. But I'm just hoping and I'm praying that someone out there that's watching this will come forward with answers. Her family deserves it. Her sons deserve it. And we will continue to utilize our platform, our resources to highlight Ebony's case. And there's so many other Ebony's out there. But we certainly want our community not to forget, because if we don't continue to spotlight these cases, our community may believe that these individuals are no longer missing. And that is not the case. We need everyone out there to always remain vigilant. And again, if you see something, say something.
Right. I think we are each other's shoulder to lean on. I know I've been greatly impacted by all of the cases that we have covered. When I speak to a family member or a friend or someone close to the missing person, it pulls at your heartstrings and you can relate, you sympathize with their situation, because it could be any of us that tomorrow someone we love vanishes and we are in that spot where we're trying to search for answers. How have you, Derica, been personally impacted by the cases that you've covered and the families that you have met?
You know, Marnie, every case that we handle, these families become part of our family, and we rejoice when we're able to find them, and we grieve when the news is the outcome that none of us expected. You know, I'm thinking about a case the other day when we were up in the wee hours of the morning because we were able to recover a child who went missing from Texas, and we found her in New York City with the assistance of the police department and the U.S. Marshals. But then we have another case the following day where a young woman was missing, and sadly, you know, she died at the hands of her estranged husband. It was a victim of domestic violence. So with our cases, we're constantly on this emotional roller coaster, but we continue to do this work because our community needs us. It is important for us to make sure that our missing become household names. And again, these families are part of our family. Once we make that initial contact, they become part of our universe, our family.
Derica, how can people find you all and take part and assist in the work that you're doing?
We certainly encourage all the viewers and listeners to visit BAMFI.org. And follow us on all of our social media platforms. And if you see a flyer, don't just like it, share it. Someone out there holds the key. And if you want to get involved with our organization, there's a link at the top of our webpage that says join our community, so you can stay up to date on all things Black and Missing Foundation. But from our website, you can access all of our social media platforms, and that's BAMFI.org.
I look forward to working with you much more in the future. Derica Wilson with the Black and Missing Foundation, thank you so much. You guys have a big heart, and we're glad to partner with you to bring more of these cases to light. Thank you.